Long before shared universes became Hollywood's biggest obsession, one film tried to bring Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Wolfman together in a single adventure. Van Helsing arrived with massive ambition, a divided audience, and a production full of secrets most viewers have never discovered. A freezing winter shoot in Prague, a beloved classic monster cut at the last minute, and a leading role shaped entirely by personality over star power. This is just the beginning. And it all started with a kid glued to his television, dreaming of the ultimate monster mashup. Number 1. Born from a childhood dream. There's a reason Van Helsing feels more like a theme park ride than a traditional horror film, and that reason goes all the way back to the director's childhood. Stephen Sommers grew up glued to classic Universal monster movies, absorbing every frame of the legendary creatures that defined early Hollywood. Those films planted a dream that never faded. Someday, he would bring all of them together in one massive adventure that honored everything he loved about them. The movie was never intended to be a faithful retelling of any single monster story. Instead, it was designed from the ground up as a celebration, a greatest hits collection of the creatures Sommers loved most. Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, and more were pulled into one universe not because it made perfect narrative sense, but because it fulfilled a lifelong fantasy that had been building for decades. That childlike imagination is exactly what gives the film its unique personality. The playful tone, the oversized action, and the refusal to take itself too seriously all trace back to a boy watching black and white monsters on a small screen. It wasn't built from a cool, calculated studio formula. It was built from pure love for the genre, and that sincerity is what keeps audiences coming back. Number 2. Why the opening is black and white. Few blockbusters have the confidence to open in black and white, but this one did it with purpose. The prologue was carefully designed to mirror the look and feel of 1930s horror cinema, complete with dramatic lighting, slow pacing, and exaggerated framing lifted straight from a vintage film reel. It was a statement of intent from the very first frame. The decision wasn't just a visual gimmick. It served as a bridge between two eras of filmmaking, easing the audience from the golden age of monsters into the high-octane modern action that would follow. Every shadow and camera angle in those opening minutes was a deliberate tribute to the films that inspired the entire project. When the color finally kicks in and the pace shifts, the contrast hits hard. The audience has already been grounded in classic horror tradition, which makes the explosive action feel earned rather than jarring. It's a clever storytelling device that sets the tone for everything ahead, a movie that respects the past while charging full speed into the present. Number 3. Dracula's castle was actually built. At a time when digital environments were becoming the norm, the production team made a bold choice. They actually constructed massive physical structures for Dracula's castle exterior. These weren't small set pieces either. The constructions were enormous, giving actors real stone and shadow to interact with before digital extensions completed the vast background surrounding them. That decision had a direct impact on performances. When actors walked through towering archways and stood beneath looming walls, their reactions carried genuine weight. There's a noticeable difference between performing against a green screen and performing inside a space that feels truly threatening, and the cast responded accordingly. The blend of practical architecture and digital enhancement gave the film a sense of scale that still holds up. Rather than relying entirely on computers to create the world, the crew anchored everything in something tangible first. It's the kind of old-school filmmaking philosophy that matched the movie's love letter to classic monster cinema perfectly. Number 4. Hugh Jackman was cast for his personality. Landing the lead role in a big-budget monster epic usually comes down to box office appeal. But in this case, the deciding factor was something far simpler: attitude. Hugh Jackman impressed the director not just with his talent, but with his professionalism, cooperative nature, and genuine enthusiasm for the material. That energy stood out immediately during the selection process. Stephen Sommers knew the shoot would be physically and mentally demanding, requiring a lead who could endure long hours, complicated effects work, and extreme conditions without creating tension on set. Other well-known actors were considered, but Jackman's personality made him the clear frontrunner. He brought a natural charm and approachability the director believed would carry the entire film through its toughest moments. The role itself was shaped around those qualities. Rather than forcing Jackman into a rigid interpretation of the classic character, the script leaned into his warmth and humor. That collaboration between performer and filmmaker gave the hero a lightness that separated him from the brooding monster hunters audiences had seen before. Number 5. the most painful werewolf transformation. Werewolf transformations have been a staple of horror cinema for decades, but the filmmakers wanted theirs to stand apart in one specific way. It had to look agonizing. Instead of a smooth, almost magical shift, the concept centered on skin, visibly tearing away to reveal the beast underneath, making every second of the change feel brutal and visceral. The audience was meant to feel the pain alongside the character. Achieving that vision required a careful marriage of practical effects and digital animation. Neither approach alone could deliver the desired result, so multiple departments had to coordinate their work precisely. Physical elements gave the sequence texture and grounding, while digital tools provided the fluid, impossible motion that made the transformation feel alive and deeply unsettling. The final result remains one of the most memorable werewolf sequences in modern film. It wasn't designed to look elegant or supernatural. It was designed to make audiences wince. That commitment to physicality over beauty gave the scene a raw intensity that still stands out among the movie's biggest visual achievements. Number 6. The Monster That Got Cut. One of the most exciting creatures in Universal's classic lineup nearly made it into the film, and was removed before audiences ever saw it. The creature from the Black Lagoon was originally planned to appear alongside Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Wolfman, which would have made the monster roster even more ambitious than what ended up on screen. Concept art was developed, and physical models were created before the decision came down to pull the character entirely. Studio executives and the creative team ultimately felt that adding another major monster would stretch the story too thin and pull focus away from the central conflict. The artwork that survived shows a version of the creature that would have fit the film's heightened visual style perfectly well. The removal is a reminder of just how packed the original vision really was. Even without the creature, the movie was already juggling multiple iconic monsters in a single narrative, something almost no film had attempted at that scale before. Fans have debated for years whether the final product would have been stronger or weaker, with the creature swimming through its climactic act. Number 7. The hit that still killed a franchise. Box office numbers can be deceiving, and few films prove that better than this one. The movie earned strong worldwide totals that would have been considered a clear success for most productions of its era, but with a massive budget behind it and even larger studio expectations, the profit margin told a very different story than the raw ticket sales suggested. Universal had positioned the project as the potential start of something much bigger, a franchise that could generate sequels, spin-offs, and extended merchandise revenue for years to come. When the returns didn't match that ambitious projection, the studio quietly shelved any continuation plans. It didn't matter that audiences showed up in significant numbers. What mattered was that they didn't show up in enough numbers to justify the enormous investment. The outcome became a textbook example of how Hollywood defines failure. A film can entertain millions, generate hundreds of millions in revenue, and still be considered a disappointment if the math doesn't satisfy corporate expectations. This production became one of the most visible casualties of that unforgiving system. Number 8. Kate Beckinsale was cast without auditioning. Getting cast in a major studio blockbuster without reading a single line might sound unusual, but that's exactly what happened here. Kate Beckinsale was offered her role directly, bypassing the traditional audition process entirely. The director had a clear vision of who he wanted opposite Hugh Jackman, and simply wasn't interested in exploring other options. The studio had different ideas. Executives pushed for a different casting direction, but Stephen Sommers held firm. He needed someone who could match Jackman's physical presence and emotional range without being overshadowed by the spectacle around them. Beckinsale had already demonstrated that exact balance in previous action roles, and the director trusted her ability to bring depth to the character under the most demanding conditions. That insistence paid off on screen. The chemistry between the two leads gave the film an emotional anchor that kept the monster chaos from feeling hollow. Sommers understood that without a believable partnership at the center, the story risked becoming nothing more than a string of effects sequences. Number 9. Igor was written for one specific actor. Most characters are written first and cast later, but one role in the film flipped that process completely. The part of Igor was essentially built from the ground up, with Kevin J. O'Connor in mind. The director didn't just think of him during casting. The character's mannerisms, humor, and entire personality were shaped by what he already knew the actor could deliver on screen. That familiarity came from previous collaborations. Sommers and O'Connor had worked together before, and that history gave the director a deep understanding of the performer's strengths and instincts. Rather than writing a generic sidekick and hoping to find the right fit, He tailored the role to someone whose timing and energy he already trusted completely. The result was a performance that felt effortless and natural within the film's exaggerated world. O'Connor brought a specific kind of energy that couldn't have been replicated by another actor stepping into the same lines. The character became distinctly his, not because he auditioned better than everyone else, but because the words on the page were already written in his voice from the very beginning. Number 10. Filming through a freezing Prague winter. The production didn't end up in Prague by accident. It was a deliberate choice driven entirely by atmosphere. The crew wanted overcast skies, moody light, and an environment that naturally looked like it belonged in a gothic horror story. Winter in the Czech capital delivered all of that and more, though it came with a physical price that tested everyone involved throughout the entire shoot. Conditions were harsh from the start. Freezing temperatures made long outdoor shoots physically draining, and the limited daylight hours forced the crew into tight scheduling windows that left almost no room for delays. The team arrived after the city's devastating flood period had passed, but the lingering cold and difficult logistics still created daily challenges that required constant problem-solving from every department on set. Despite the discomfort, the weather became one of the film's greatest unintentional assets. The grey skies, cold breath, and heavy atmosphere visible on screen weren't manufactured. They were real. That authenticity gave the movie a visual texture that would have been nearly impossible to recreate on a controlled soundstage, turning a difficult production condition into one of the film's most defining visual qualities. Number 11. The director's 7:30 p.m. wrap rule. On most big-budget productions, long shooting days are simply part of the deal. Crews regularly push past 12 or 14 hours to stay on schedule, and exhaustion becomes an accepted cost of doing business. But on this set, something unusual happened. The director called wrap at the same time every single day, creating a rhythm that was almost unheard of for a film of this scale. That decision wasn't random. Stephen Sommers believed that a well-rested crew would consistently deliver better work than an exhausted one grinding through overtime. By maintaining a strict daily cutoff, he gave everyone a predictable structure that allowed them to recover and return focused the next morning. Cast members later spoke about how that consistency kept morale noticeably higher than on comparable productions. The approach also influenced the performances themselves. When actors know their day has a clear endpoint, they tend to bring sharper focus to every take rather than pacing themselves for an unpredictable marathon. In an industry built on long hours and burnout, that discipline stood out as a quiet act of creative defiance. Number 12. Hugh Jackman's secret dance rehearsals. Behind the dark costumes and gothic atmosphere, the production had a lighter side that rarely made it into press coverage. The cast and crew maintained a playful environment between takes, turning the long days in heavy makeup and elaborate sets into something far more enjoyable than the grim visuals might suggest. One of the most memorable moments involved Hugh Jackman being caught rehearsing dance moves while still in full Van Helsing costume. The discovery quickly became a beloved behind-the-scenes story, painting a picture of a lead actor who refused to let the weight of a massive production kill his sense of humor. It was the kind of spontaneous moment that bonded the crew together and eased the pressure of a demanding schedule. Those lighter moments mattered more than they might seem. A relaxed set tends to produce more natural performances, and actors who genuinely enjoy working together bring a chemistry to their scenes that can't be faked. That freedom translated directly to what ended up on screen. Number 13. Kate Beckinsale's real 80-foot jump. Action sequences in modern blockbusters often rely heavily on stunt doubles and digital face replacements, but one of the film's most physically demanding moments was performed by the actress herself. Kate Beckinsale committed to doing her own stunt work wherever possible, and that dedication extended to a dramatic high-altitude jump that pushed the limits of what most performers would agree to attempt on a studio production. The preparation was intense. Beckinsale trained extensively for wire work and height-based stunts, building the physical confidence needed to execute sequences that carried real risk. The specific jump required multiple attempts to get right, with safety teams working closely to ensure each take was controlled without sacrificing the raw energy the director wanted. The payoff is visible in the finished film. There's a tangible difference between watching a real person navigate a dangerous physical moment and watching a digitally enhanced version of the same action. That willingness to push herself physically gave the character a credibility that elevated every action scene she appeared in. Number 14. Why Sunshine kept stopping production. Most productions worry about rain delays, but this one had the opposite problem. Since so much of the story revolves around vampires and dark gothic environments, The crew needed overcast skies and heavy cloud cover to maintain visual consistency. When the sun broke through unexpectedly, it didn't just create a lighting inconvenience, it brought entire shooting days to a halt. The team found themselves in the unusual position of waiting for clouds the way other crews wait for clear weather. Scheduling had to remain flexible enough to accommodate nature's unpredictability, which meant constantly reshuffling the day's plan based on what the sky decided to do. Scenes requiring darkness or heavy shadow were pushed and pulled across the calendar, creating logistical headaches that rippled through every department. Every perfectly gloomy frame on screen represents a moment where the weather cooperated, or where the crew waited patiently until it did. The natural conditions that made Prague such an ideal location also came with this unpredictable downside, turning the sky itself into one of the most unreliable members of the entire production team. Number 15. Sommer's unusually calm directing style. Big-budget action sets are often described as chaotic, high-pressure environments where tension runs as high as the budget. But multiple people who worked on this production painted a very different picture of what daily life was actually like behind the cameras. The atmosphere was described as unusually calm and structured, guided by a director who favored clear communication over controlled intensity. Stephen Sommers brought an approach that felt more collaborative than commanding. Rather than dictating every detail from a position of authority, he consulted actors frequently and encouraged input from department heads across the board. That openness created a working environment where people felt valued rather than managed, and cast members noted that his style made them feel like genuine partners rather than employees executing orders. In the context of a massive effects-driven blockbuster, that philosophy was genuinely rare. Productions of this size tend to generate enormous pressure that flows downhill from studio executives to directors to crew, and maintaining calm under those circumstances takes real discipline. Sommers managed to keep that pressure from reaching the people doing the actual creative work. Number 16. The 7-hour daily makeup process. Bringing Frankenstein's monster to life on screen required far more than digital wizardry. It started with hours in a makeup chair before the actor ever stepped in front of a camera. The daily transformation process stretched to roughly 7 hours, demanding extraordinary patience from the performer and the effects team alike. It was the kind of grueling preparation that most audiences never consider when watching the finished creature move effortlessly across the screen. The makeup artists worked meticulously to build the character's appearance layer by layer, applying prosthetics, textures, and paint with surgical precision. Every session had to match the previous one exactly to maintain continuity between shooting days, which meant the process couldn't be rushed, no matter how tight the schedule became. Despite the growing dominance of digital effects at the time, the production insisted on grounding this character in practical craftsmanship first. When the creature appeared on screen, it occupied real space, cast real shadows, and interacted with real environments, a quality that added a crucial layer of believability to even the most fantastical scenes surrounding it. Number 17. Children who befriended Frankenstein's monster. One of the most unexpected details from the production had nothing to do with cameras or special effects. It happened between takes, when crew members' families came to visit the set. Children regularly showed up to see the elaborate environments and towering costumes their parents were helping to build, and their reactions quickly became one of the warmest recurring moments of the entire shoot. What made it particularly memorable was how the youngest visitors responded to Frankenstein's monster. A character designed to be intimidating on screen became something entirely different in person. Rather than frightening the children, the fully costumed actor became a friendly presence they looked forward to seeing on each visit. Behind the gothic sets and monster makeup was a workplace where families felt welcome and children laughed in the shadow of creatures designed to frighten millions. It's the kind of behind-the-scenes detail that changes how you see a film, knowing that the same environments built to create nightmares on screen also served as a playground for the smallest members of the production family. Number 18. The loudest score of 2004. A film's musical identity can define the entire viewing experience, and few scores that year committed to their vision as aggressively as this one did. The composition leaned heavily into powerful percussion and sweeping choral arrangements, creating a wall of sound that refused to let the audience sit passively through any scene. It was bold, relentless, and completely impossible to ignore from the opening note to the very last. That musical direction pushed the movie firmly toward the adventure end of the spectrum rather than traditional horror. Where a quieter, more atmospheric score might have emphasized dread and suspense, this one chose raw energy and forward momentum instead. Every action sequence was amplified by the music behind it, keeping the pace from ever settling into stillness for too long. The result was a score that essentially became another character in the film, constantly present, constantly driving, and constantly shaping how each moment landed emotionally. Whether it enhanced the experience or overwhelmed it depended entirely on personal taste, but no one could accuse the composers of playing it safe. Number 19. How the score was built like Lego blocks. The unconventional approach to the film's music didn't stop at composition. It extended into how the score was actually assembled during post-production. Rather than delivering a continuous piece tailored to specific scenes, the composer provided interchangeable sections that could be rearranged, swapped, and recombined depending on the evolving needs of each edit. It was a modular system that treated music like building blocks rather than a fixed narrative structure. Stephen Sommers took full advantage of that flexibility during the editing process. As scenes were trimmed, reordered, or restructured, the musical pieces could shift along with them without requiring entirely new recordings. This gave the director an unusual degree of control over the film's rhythm, allowing him to experiment with pacing in ways that a traditional scoring process would not have permitted. The score moves through the film with a distinctive energy, sometimes abruptly, sometimes seamlessly, that reflects its modular origins. Critics who analyzed the soundtrack picked up on its unusual construction, noting how certain passages felt deliberately interchangeable rather than custom-built for a single moment. Number 20. The DVD packed with behind-the-scenes secrets. When the film arrived on home video, it came loaded with supplementary material that went far beyond the standard deleted scenes and theatrical trailer. The DVD release was treated as a genuine opportunity to expand the story and pull back the curtain on the creative process, offering viewers a much deeper understanding of how the entire production came together. Commentary tracks gave the filmmakers a chance to explain decisions that might have puzzled audiences during their first viewing. Behind-the-scenes featurettes walked through the elaborate effects work, from the practical monster designs to the digital environments that extended every set beyond its physical boundaries. Each piece of bonus content added another layer of context, transforming the home release from a simple rewatch into something closer to a guided tour of the entire production. Those extras played a significant role in building the film's cult following over the years that followed. Viewers who may have been lukewarm on the theatrical experience discovered new appreciation when they understood the craftsmanship and ambition behind it. For many fans, that deeper access was what turned casual interest into lasting devotion. Number 21. The cast was assigned classic monster homework. Before production ever began, the creative team was given an unusual assignment: study the classics. Cast and crew members were encouraged to immerse themselves in the original Universal monster films that had inspired the entire project from the very start. It wasn't optional enthusiasm, it was treated as genuine preparation, ensuring that everyone involved understood the visual and tonal legacy they were building upon. The influence of that research showed up in countless details throughout the finished film. Set designs carried deliberate echoes of earlier cinema, from the shape of doorways to the texture of laboratory equipment. Lighting choices referenced specific shots from decades-old productions, and character movements occasionally mirrored the exaggerated physicality of performers from a completely different era. The result is a film that functions on two levels simultaneously. Casual viewers experience a fast-paced monster adventure, while those familiar with classic horror recognize a layered homage hiding beneath the modern surface. That dual identity gives the movie a richness that rewards repeated viewings, as new references reveal themselves to anyone willing to look closely enough. Number 22. Why the hero is named Gabriel. Most audiences accepted the hero's name without a second thought, but the choice was anything but arbitrary. Naming the character Gabriel was a deliberate decision that separated him from every previous interpretation of the classic monster hunter. It wasn't just a cosmetic change or a simple creative preference. It carried layers of symbolic meaning that quietly reshaped the character's entire mythology beneath the surface. The name carries strong connections to religious and mythological tradition, suggesting a figure tied to something far larger and older than a simple human bounty hunter. By embedding that symbolism into the character's core identity, the filmmakers created a subtle undercurrent of hidden lore that most viewers absorbed without consciously recognizing it. The choice hinted at an expanded backstory the film only partially explored. That kind of quiet world-building is easy to overlook in a movie packed with explosions and creature battles, but it speaks to the ambition behind the project. The creative team wasn't content with simply putting a hero on screen and letting the action carry the story. They wanted to build a mythology around him that extended well beyond what the plot explicitly stated. Number 23. The merchandise was ready before the film. Long before audiences had a chance to form their own opinions, the studio was already betting heavily on the film's commercial future. Merchandise lines and video game tie-ins were developed well in advance of the theatrical release, signaling a level of corporate confidence that went far beyond simply hoping for a hit at the box office. The expectation wasn't just that viewers would enjoy the movie, it was that they would want to live inside its world long after leaving the theater. The merchandise planning extended into unusual territory. Actors contributed voice work and motion capture for the video game adaptation, blurring the line between the film and its commercial extensions in ways that were still relatively uncommon for the era. These weren't afterthought products slapped together to capitalize on opening weekend buzz. They were carefully coordinated pieces of a much larger franchise strategy. When the franchise failed to materialize as planned, all of that pre-built infrastructure became a quiet monument to unrealized ambition. Products designed for a future that never arrived, sitting on clearance shelves meant for a universe that never fully expanded. Number 24. The monster rumors that weren't true. In the months surrounding the film's release, rumors circulated wildly about additional classic creatures making surprise appearances throughout the story. Fan communities speculated endlessly about which monsters might show up, fueled by the movie's ambitious premise of combining Universal's legendary roster into a single, interconnected adventure. The excitement built expectations that extended well beyond what the filmmakers had actually planned or were ever prepared to deliver. Stephen Sommers addressed those rumors directly, denying that many of the speculated creatures were ever part of the production's official roadmap. Some of the reported ideas had never existed outside of fan imagination, while others may have been briefly discussed in early meetings but never seriously pursued beyond the conceptual stage. That dynamic is a reminder of how audience speculation can reshape a film's legacy independently of what actually appears on screen. Viewers who arrived expecting a parade of hidden monsters may have felt disappointed by their absence, even though those creatures were never promised in the first place. The film became partially defined not by what it contained, but by what people believed it should have contained. Number 25. The stunt team that redefined the action. Behind every impossible leap, mid-air collision, and monster brawl in Van Helsing sat one of the most quietly ambitious stunt operations of its era. The action choreography wasn't handed off to a standard team following a formula, it was built from scratch around the specific physical demands of creatures that didn't move like humans. Vampires needed to fly and strike with inhuman speed. Werewolves needed weight and ferocity. The Wolfman's transformation alone required stunt performers to contort their bodies in ways that conventional training rarely prepares anyone for. The team spent weeks developing movement vocabularies for each creature before a single camera rolled. How a vampire lands differently from how a human lands. How a werewolf absorbs impact versus how it delivers it. Those distinctions seem small on paper, but became the foundation of every fight sequence in the film. Without that preparation, the creatures would have moved like people in costumes rather than beings from a different physical reality entirely. What audiences registered, without necessarily knowing why, was a consistency of movement that gave the monsters genuine menace. It wasn't the visual effects that made the creatures feel dangerous. It was the body language underneath them, built by performers who had spent weeks learning to stop being human for the camera. That invisible labor is the reason the action sequences still hold up, and it remains one of the most underappreciated achievements the production quietly pulled off. Van Helsing was never a safe bet. It asked audiences to accept a world where Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Wolfman shared the screen in a single high-octane adventure, years before shared universes became the industry standard. The ambition behind it was enormous, and while not every gamble paid off at the time, the vision was undeniably ahead of its time. If these secrets change the way you see the film, make sure to like and subscribe for more hidden stories behind your favorite movies. Which classic Universal monster do you think deserved its own spin-off the most?